So, Kerry, welcome to the Recruitment, Marketing and Sales podcast. And thank you for being our guest this week. It's great to see you.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to see you, Sharon. I think I last saw you in sunny Scarborough just at the beginning of the summer. So it's really lovely to see you again.
It was indeed. And Joe, I just want to say, really appreciate you taking some time to, share your story. And I guess, some of the lessons from the journey that you've had, because we've had some great interviews recently, lots of great insights. And I know that you've got so much that you can share, from your experience with Castle, which has been around for such a long time. So before we dive into the detail of that, maybe I could just invite you to share with the audience, a bit about your background, and what was the story that led you to joining Castle?
Sure. So I was born and bred in Scarborough, and decided that I needed to leave. Went off to Bradford University, lived away for several years, and then fell into recruitment. I worked for a corporate for many years in Leeds, recruiting solicitors actually on an interim basis. And their training and development was, I would say at the time, by far the best in the market. I learned so much in those 9 years with that company. And then I was headhunted to join a smaller independent company in Yorkshire. And again,
right.
Their process and their way to win business and their sales technique opened my eyes, working for a smaller independent, having been in a corporate. And they asked me to open a new office, which again gave me some different types of skills. I moved with my then CEO to a business that meant that I was leaving on a Monday, coming back on a Thursday. I'd achieved my dream, really. I was managing 3 businesses. I think it was across 6 sites. And it still hadn't ticked all the boxes. So I decided that the thing that was missing, having achieved this lifelong dream, was the fact that it wasn't in Scarborough. So relocated back to Scarborough, which is, as I mentioned, where I was originally from. My family was still there. And at this point, it didn't matter about work. It was work-life balance was super important. I have 2 children. Yeah. They were really young at the time, 3 and 8. And as I say, I was leaving on a Monday, coming back on a Thursday. So I moved back to Scarborough, and I contacted Castle for any role at all. And Suzanne, who was the owner at the time, said, well, I think you might just have knocked at the right time, because I'm looking for somebody to possibly lead the business. And that was 2014. And I have absolutely never looked back.
Wow, fantastic. And I can certainly relate to that, going away from home on a Monday, coming back on a Thursday. It's sort of like, it's almost in a way what you aspire to at a certain point in life, isn't it? And then when you get there, it's actually, you realise there's a lot of fulfillment in it, and it comes at a cost. It does come at a cost, doesn't it? And so, it was good timing, but what was it that sort of like, was that big motivation to, I guess, take over a business that got the history that it had. And it's got an interesting history, isn't it? Hadn't it, that you were about to then become, I guess, the 4th female owner?
Well, I think, and I've really evaluated this over the years, because I'm definitely one to look back and evaluate on most things. In fact, most days day to day, I tend to do that. But so I joined, and there was about 8 or 9 of us, and the business had a fantastic reputation around Scarborough and the surrounding areas. Really had some really big accounts, and Suzanne was phenomenal at really looking after her staff. So the majority of the guys have been there a really long time, and they were like a really tight family. And that was quite new for me. So I all I did was apply all I'd ever learnt to the people. And I was really fortunate that they took on board what I was teaching. And I had to lead from the front initially. And I took a desk and recruited on engineering, actually, which is where my heart lies. I'd never done it before, but I had this big passion for it. I love factories, I love manufacturing. And fortunately for me, the team that a couple of people came with me from where I'd worked before, but the people that were there bought into me, bought into the plan, and made everything much more transparent. And then we grew at an almighty pace. And I think because I was just applying the theory and the knowledge that I'd always done in every business that I'd worked for, I had the backing of Suzanne, who had the cash in the business to allow me to make the investment ultimately. And we'd grown the business to, there's about 40 of us at the point that Suzanne and I started to talk about her exit strategy. I mean, the key thing for me and her was we had really open conversations really early. And so I knew what her goals were. She knew what my goals were. I think as I started to build the business and to make it even more successful, I was really aware that the more successful I made it, the more this was going to cost me to buy it eventually. We always knew that would be the plan at the point that I demonstrated to her that I was somebody that she would really want to give the opportunity to buy it. So for me, it was the people that were in the business when I arrived, the people that we hired thereafter that really got on board with the plan, the strategy and the growth plan, and the backing from Suzanne, and the opportunity. I will be forever grateful for the opportunity she gave me. And to be honest, we worked with a lot of different accountants, and that wasn't easy to find the one that allowed me the opportunity to be able to find the funding to be able to do it. And again, I'm really grateful for them, because I think without that creative approach, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I wouldn't have been able to take the business from Suzanne in 2021, mid-COVID, which is when I did it.
Well, that was an interesting time to do it, goodness sake. Gosh. Well, look, I will come on to sort of like that COVID experience, but I guess before we get there, you'd already, from 2014 through to late 2019, early 2020, you'd already gone through a massive sort of like growth curve there. And even though you were implementing, I guess, everything that you'd known and had implemented before it in past businesses, I imagine there were still challenges and hurdles to overcome. And I'm just curious, what some of those were.
Sure, absolutely. We'd gone from 8 people to just before COVID around 40 people. That's rapid growth. It was massive. Anywhere between 25 and 30% growth year on year on revenue. We went from 2 million turnover. Well, in fact, it was less than that when I joined. Just under 2 million to around 7 million turnover in a 6-year period. It was exponential, actually. Really exciting. And every time we set a business plan for 2 or 3 years, we achieved it. We smashed it. It was a bit like, are these goals challenging enough? But for me, and in recruitment, as other recruitment leaders will absolutely share, it was about the growth of the business from 2014 to 2020. It was a really superbly exciting time. As I mentioned, we're setting goals, we were smashing the goals, exceeding the expectations of all of us. And I had a really fantastic team. Without them, we wouldn't have been able to do it. But the biggest challenge is the processes, operating procedures that you think you've made it really clear. And then there's one person that you say that to, and then that team becomes 3. And then some of these habits get forgotten about. And as a team of leaders, you then forget that was a really good habit. So the habit gets forgotten about. And afterwards, when something doesn't happen, you're like, but we always did that. When did we stop? So I'd say that process and operating it was definitely a key thing. I mean, one thing I feel like I've always had my finger on the pulse with is the family feel and the uplifting team, fun, positive environment, because I've always said, irrespective of our growth plans, we've got a really ambitious 5-year growth plan. We're in the 2nd year of that. If at any point anybody felt that they weren't known or recognised or praised or they became a number, then the growth would stop, the plan would stop at that point. So I think we managed to do that. I think there was some people you know, when it became more corporate, because it had to be in terms of regulation and compliance and quality. Some people struggled with that initially, but just those that didn't like change, they eventually came round. And you know, our average attrition is 8 years. You know, people have been with Castle on average 8 years, and in recruitment, that's unheard of.
It is. It is to have. You know, I think when you and I met, and you were sharing that with me, I think to have the number of people in a business, you know, you might often get, you know, half a dozen. But in a business your size, the sheer number of people that have been there for so long is testament really to that culture that you know, Suzanne started, and you've kind of like built on. I'm just curious, you know, in terms of systems and processes, when you are scaling and growing, and of course that's just continuing in your 5-year plan, you know. Are there tension points when actually you need to just revisit some of those systems in terms of, will they scale us to the next level?
Yeah, absolutely. For example, we've had to, as you know, because you've been helping us, work on our marketing strategy, because what we were doing historically wouldn't have got to the next level. And one thing that we identified is getting talent in Scarborough when you're by the coast is quite challenging. So to have gotten to the headcount that we needed to get to by 2027, we realised that we needed to hub another big centre. And Jess, who's the director of the Leeds office, we both work together in Leeds, recruiting together in Leeds. So we both know that market well, we know the competition well. And so we decided strategically that the hub would mirror Scarborough, and we would put a hub in Leeds. And actually we have been really successful with recruiting some phenomenal talent, both with recruitment experience and without, because there's more opportunity to take from more companies around, because you know they haven't got the seaside on one side like what we have. So that we had to decide to move to Leeds to get the growth. We wouldn't have got the growth purely out of Scarborough.
And I guess, you know, you had that accelerated growth up to sort of 2020, and then of course we had that huge kind of like hiccup, didn't we? That was COVID. And I guess, you know, it seems so long ago now. And yet when we were all going through it, it was pretty uncomfortable and challenging times. I'm just curious about, you know, what for you perhaps was some of those, you know, those big lessons that you took away from it, you know, because we're beyond the challenges of it, aren't we? But what were some of the lessons that I guess you learned that maybe you brought forward with you?
Yeah, I think we acted really quickly. I am quite impulsive, and I had to go with my gut instinct and make decisions really, really quickly. For example, we'd just taken on a new lease, and it had a get out clause after 6 months in it, upstairs, to massively expand Scarborough, because we still had further growth plans at that point. Very quickly we retracted out of that lease and moved back down. No one knew how long any of this was going to be lasting for. We just built a really successful, phenomenally successful York team. We had 10 in that office, and then when we reflected, the majority of that could be done from Scarborough, so we moved those people back to Scarborough because they were travelling. Majority of those were travelling. So we made decisions really, really quickly, and I think that really helped. The furlough was a really tough time, but that's ultimately what saved us. You know, without that furlough, because we lost 80% of our market overnight. But we again on the furlough, it was a difficult decision to make, but for me, I had to keep a team that were on site at Food Factory in the industrial team. They worked all the way through COVID. They did a phenomenal job at supporting a food factory. Everybody needed food, obviously, in those times. And so they stayed. And I think there was 25 fee earners outside of that team, and I furloughed everybody other than 4 of us. And it was me coordinating what was still happening with those people around me that could just respond and go across different divisions at the time, because there were still some clients recruiting. And I did also look at people's personal circumstances, because kids were at home. You know, these,
Of course, yeah.
as you know, a large proportion of Castle, like 86% of Castle are female. And of those 86, 75% of them work part-time because they are parents.
Right.
So
Right.
for me, it was giving them that opportunity to be at home with the kids, doing the homeschooling, whilst those that were remaining, you know, I did have that, but it was my business. I didn't have a choice. So
Yeah.
I'd say that's how I made the decision. And then the things that I felt went really well, hopefully people that worked for Castle would say the same, is communication. We were crystal clear weekly, same week, same time, same day, with an update, what was happening, what we'd been doing in recruitment, what jobs were coming in, so that they felt informed. My big belief is any amount of uncertainty makes people really, really unhappy, and they absolutely needed to be informed. Whether it was bad news, they needed the communication to know exactly what was going to be happening. And as soon as I could tell them, I told them. So I would say we also pivoted, and I used the support of a coaching company, Centred Excellence, the phenomenal, you know them, and Nikki and Katie were there every day to give daily updates to me, to support me, to tell my team with what was happening on the services that we're offering. And in the end, you know, when the recruitment did dry up entirely, we were offering free services to our current clients. We were offering them anything that they needed to help them survive. And I think that, again, reflecting on that, meant that when the market did come back and COVID did come back, they phoned us, because we stayed with them throughout the times, even when they weren't recruiting.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, you know, that was, you know, one of those times when, you know, there was a fantastic opportunity to just add a huge amount of value and draw on all those skills and experiences that you got that often are part of the recruitment process. The client maybe doesn't always recognize that, but you were still able to, you know, to add that kind of value. And it's interesting actually listening to you, because you have, and you did then, you had a big team, you know, and I know, you know, from being on, you know, loads of those webinars that we were all on, you know, almost like daily, just learning from each other, weren't we? That, you know, some companies actually made that decision to make people redundant. And so it's interesting that, you know, the decision that you made, and also that decision that you made that you've just shared, where you were communicating weekly with people that were on furlough, because that didn't happen in all organisations.
Yeah.
You know, and I think there's a lot of...
Unfortunately, we had to make redundancies. You know, we didn't escape that. And that was down to, we had gone through this massive period of growth, and we just started the next phase of growth. So we'd hired a lot of people, and we were about to get the investment back. And as COVID hit, so we'd gone for that 6-month period where you don't get the return on the investment, and we were just about to get the return on the investment when COVID hit, and the market. So I kept them as long as I could on furlough, absolutely. But at the point that we knew furlough was coming, and the market didn't return anywhere near as quickly or as we'd have hoped, unfortunately. I lost some really dear friends in that. You know, a lot of the guys that I work with, I would call my friends, and that was probably the hardest thing I've had to do in my career.
Yeah. And so, you know, in terms of things gradually building on the back of that, you know, you're still on this amazing kind of, you know, 5-year growth plan. You're as you say, you're 2 years into that. What do you see then, you know, having come through all those challenges of COVID, what might be the next set of challenges as you know, because you've got some massive ambitious plans.
Yeah, I never seem to stop, and and I'm lucky that I've got a team that's supportive of me in that ambition, really. So I would say that the biggest next challenge we've got is we have ambition to take market share in Leeds. I mean, they're based in Leeds. Our patch for them is West Yorkshire. which is massive. You know, there's some Halifax, Bradford, Huddersfield, you know, there are Tadcaster, there are areas that are absolutely untapped in the markets that we're specialising in over there. But that is a big challenge. It's a big challenge. We've chosen to do it this year. In a year again, when other recruiters are making redundancies, we've hired, we've hired and grown that team by 300%. You know, we're making the investment. We're going to ride it. They are really talented. We've managed to attract some brilliant consultants, but we now have to open a new brand in a new geographical area where there is solid competition and really good competition in the market to take some of that market share. So that's definitely going to be a challenge. And I would say really the next challenge is a really exciting one because it's all about tech. You know, our challenge now is to keep up and to keep ahead of the curve.
Absolutely.
You know, I have absolutely not seen in the last couple of years the amount of change that we're all seeing than I have in 20 years of being in recruitment. You know, we have to keep our people up to date, and that's really difficult with some people that don't like change, because they're going to have to change their ways, their processes. Luckily for us, we've got a team of brilliantly talented consultants that like influencing, like being in front of people, like building relationships. We're trusted partners with a lot of our clients, and people retain and keep repeating their business with us. So we're going to be lucky that AI and tech won't be able to replace that. But there are some people that are more transactional recruiters, and they will struggle when things really do become apparent. I mean, we're already mapping the recruitment cycle from start to finish on what will be automated and what do you need talent in, and what talent is that going to be. And I'm really lucky that the talent that I've got will be able to fill those gaps. So that is absolutely going to be the next challenge, is to make sure we're ahead of the game, make sure I've got enough capacity in-house where people aren't fearing to be able to keep up with the changes in the tech, or we're going to have to outsource it. And
it almost does feel sort of, you know, during COVID, the advances in technology, you know, in that initial sort of 6 to 9 months, I mean, normally if we'd not had COVID, that probably would have taken about 5-6 years for us to kind of, you know, it was just phenomenal. And it doesn't feel like it's slowed down. If anything, it feels like the pace is continuing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I wonder, as you're navigating, because, you know, 2023 for many businesses and for, you know, different sectors, I mean, you're multi-sector, so I imagine, you know, potentially some sectors have been influenced more and less by the economic situation that we've been experiencing this last year. So I wonder, as a leader, you know, for you, what has it meant in terms of, you know, perhaps skills that you've had to draw on, skills that maybe you've kind of like, you know, had to brush up, you know, develop, that maybe you've not quite so much? I mean, what has it meant for you as a leader?
I would say, as I just previously mentioned, the change in tech, automation, everything that's happening there, I have to be at the forefront and have to be able to work out where that can add some value and make our team more efficient. But I always believe that communication in times of challenge and times of uncertainty, which we're feeling, you know, it's a bit bumpy at the moment. It is a bit bumpy is the best way for me to describe what's happening in the market, because like you said, I've got one consultant who's just done her best ever, and I've got somebody else who's like, I can't get a job on what's happening in my sector. So it is totally different. But I think driving the motivation, making sure people feel supported, and having and remaining to do the clear vision with a clear purpose, and that people know that their roles actually matter in that, and that they can see that. We're you know, really making sure we're listening to our people at the moment. We're doing a lot on employee surveys. We do the Gallup 12, we call it the Castle Promise, we do ENPS, we've got a group of people now called The Voice. We need to be listening to how they're feeling, because this is not an easy industry right now. Last year was easy. You know, people had a successful year, best of a year. We're back to how it was before COVID. It's no different to that. It's just remembering that that's what it was like. It was a long time ago, and some of these guys haven't been in that market. So reminding them of that. And for me, I love networking. So I'm back out doing that and forcing myself to do that more. Whereas before I might have started being a bit more insular, working on projects that would improve efficiencies or I guess in addition to that, being much more outward focused. So I love networking and being part of the community, understanding what's happening in the business world, and finding out what else is happening in West Yorkshire as well as North Yorkshire. And I've just agreed to be a director on the Chamber of Commerce. I'm enjoying being in the groups across Yorkshire to understand what's happening in business, what's the pain, how can we support, and to just be visible. And I think if your guys are seeing that, you know, my guys are seeing that that's what I'm doing, then they're going to follow suit. I've also said today I am doing some shadowing. I've done some shadowing with some guys to say, how confident do you feel to speak to clients, new clients? Let me do some sales shadowing with you. I'll do some calls. You do some calls. Listen to me. So I'm right at the forefront. Everybody's seeing that. That's on the sales floor. I'm not doing it in a room hidden. I'm saying, let me come on some visits with you. Let me build your confidence to be even better at what you're doing. So I would say outward focus, and I would also say supporting you guys and saying, you know, I know this is tough, but I'll go and do what I'm asking you to do. I'd never ask somebody to do what I wouldn't be prepared to do myself.
No, and I think, you know what, as I listen to you sort of, you know, just share that, you know, that phrase, you know, absolutely leading from the front and not expecting somebody to do something that you're not willing to do, you know, is a great a great thing, isn't it? And I mean, you know, you've been a leader for, you know, quite a number of years now. What would you say? What's been your biggest lesson? You know, or there might even be one or two.
Biggest lesson. That's always a tricky one, I think. If I think there's definitely plenty of them. You know, and I think, as I mentioned when we were logging on, actually, everything that I do, I always learn by my mistakes. I am an analyzer of, and I'm sure that I overanalyze what could we have done differently. So if a fee doesn't go through, what could we have done differently? If a candidate doesn't get selected for interview, well, what didn't we ask? What could we have done? And I'm sure that that's a little bit relentless for some of the guys that work for me, to be honest. But I do that for myself. I do, you know, if I have to do a difficult one-to-one, or if I'm doing some coaching and I don't get the right outcome, I'm thinking, what didn't I ask? What could I have asked differently? And so I'm constantly assessing the data, the numbers. So I'm probably imagining that I can overanalyze, and that could be quite challenging. But I am one that will, I hope my direct team would say this, if I make a mistake, I hold my hand up straight away and reflect and think, right, okay, so how can we do this differently? And there has been a few of them, you know. I think I'm also not a finisher. So I'm a creator and innovator. You've met me a couple of times. It's probably definitely come across. So I've got ideas. I see other sectors. I see what they're doing. And I think we could do that. We could adapt that. No one else is doing that in recruitment. I think building a team of finishers around me has taken some time. And building a team strong enough to be able to say, we're already on with one idea. Let's just capture that and finish that first, Kerry. And I've just appointed, as you know, as senior marketing manager. And that was one of the criteria in all interviews that I had to ask. You need to be able to say no to me. You need to be able to manage upwards and absolutely say, it's a great idea. We can absolutely do it, but we have to finish this first. Or you have to tell me what, you know, to slow down a little bit, really, because I do work 150 miles an hour and not everybody else does. So when everybody else doesn't move at the same pace as me, doesn't adapt to change as quickly as me, I think I can forget that I need to just stop first and think, I just need to be mindful of who's not going to react to this news the same as I'm going to react to this news. And I have to force myself to do that. But I'll tell you what we did do. We did a brilliant exercise with Gallup on their strengths model with a management team. And that's really helped. It's a lady called Sidekick. She came in and did the strengths, the strengths finder. It's a Gallup tool, and it really helped us all appreciate each other's differences in a totally different way. So now one of the leaders was like, I get that I'm different to you, but I also get that you need me. And so I'm not going to stop trying to be, I'm going to not be somebody else. I'm going to continue being me because this team dynamic needs me and you need my strength. So I think recognizing that, complimenting that, supporting her to be different in her strengths, because those are her strengths, is, it's been a really good exercise.
Yeah,
if I answered your question then, I'll walk on a little bit.
Well, no, I think, and it's interesting because I think, you've got that awareness of the pace that you work at. And I think, with that creativity, every business, if a business doesn't have innovation, it's kind of like, it's just going to eventually kind of like die, isn't it? So innovation is absolutely fundamental. And it's being mindful that, as you innovate and create, you've got to kind of like bring people with you, and people have got different, they've all got different personalities, they've all got different strengths and communication styles. And so they are going to move through that change cycle at slightly different paces. And it's just being mindful that you move at a pace where you can keep inspiring them and motivating them to follow, and they don't lag too much, isn't it? I guess one of my penultimate question, let's say, because you mentioned right at the beginning when you were talking about, your personal story, about the fact that, you moved back to Scarborough because of the impact on your own work-life balance. So, here you are leading this business through, some the next level of change, got big ambitious plans. And you do move at a pace, and I know that you do take on a lot. How do you, I guess, foster in the business? I know work-life balance is important to you, but how do you foster it and allow that to people to get that work-life balance? Because you have got some very passionate, committed people, who probably have got a little bit of, your drive as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we offer flexible working, and there's a really clear policy. We talk about it a lot. And as long as people are getting their job done, they can come and go within certain boundaries. But and that is the flexible working policy. So and we have created things like duvet days, so that if they are really struggling, or the children are really poorly and they just can't make it in, and it's just feeling a bit too much today, then they can say, I've looked at my diary and I'm going to try and take a duvet day, please. So we allow for those kinds of things. And I think it's making sure that people in our team are using their exercise hours and are going out for walks. And we try and change when it gets dark. We're really aware that the only daylight people get is when they're in the office. So we're saying, we absolutely will encourage you to get out in the day and get fresh air and get daylight, because otherwise you're in an air-conditioned office with artificial lighting. So we're really aware of things like that. And for me, I don't really have a hobby, so I don't feel like for me, work is a hobby, and I have no problem with that. But I don't have the expectation that other people also feel like that. I'm really lucky that every day I come to work, I absolutely love my job. I absolutely love the fact that we are growing our candidates' careers. We're growing out Yorkshire. We're building businesses for them. I'm growing our employees here and their careers, their salaries, their earnings. And I love that every single day. And so I'm aware that not everyone else does feel like that all the time. I just know how lucky I am. I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful, to be honest. But I do, I don't insist. And it's certainly, I have had to alter my expectations. And I think COVID definitely changed everybody's expectations on getting this work-life balance right. I think everybody became much more aware of getting that balance significantly, and we've really worked hard to make sure we feel like we do that well.
And I think, so just what you sharing your own experience there. I always remember many years ago in my corporate days, a sales director sort of, saying, work-life balance is a personal thing, because there'd been loads of feedback from the management group about, the excessive demands when they'd spent, a 9-hour day out in the field, and then expectations of a couple of hours on email at night. And I remember him saying, there's been no communication to say that you have to sit at a laptop at 9 o'clock at night and respond to emails. If you're choosing to do that, that's got to be a personal choice. And there are people, and like you, I don't see what I do as a job. It's kind of like that. There's very blurred lines between, in my life and how I do things. And I, I guess that's what you're saying. And it's recognizing that that's not the same for everybody. We are business owners, and yet we have got employees that actually share a huge amount of passion that we do, and also have quite blurred lines. But it's got to be individual choice within the boundaries that you set within the business, hasn't it? I think that's
absolutely
the thing. And so, look, hey, I could keep asking you loads of questions and keep chatting, and I know that you could probably chat as well. And, we've probably got busy rest of the days. But how can people find out more about Castle?
So there's our website. We've just recently recreated that this year, which is exciting. It's got all the information about us to join us, but also about there's a great candidate area, client area. So the website, we're also on all socials. So there's we have an Instagram, LinkedIn, and a Facebook page, and a Twitter page. Soon to be more TikToks.
Right.
So,
yeah, excellent.
That's something that's on the horizon. But so the website is definitely the best place to catch us.
It's the best place. And that will be sort of Castle-recruitment, or Castle-employment,
Castle-employment. Yeah, it's employment. We're employment because, of course, we've been established over 55 years, when I don't think the word recruitment in terms of an agency was something. It was an employment agency then. So, we're Castle-employment. So it's castle-employment.co.uk.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you so much again for your time and for sharing some real gems, and for being so passionate about what you do as well. It's really infectious, and I know that will have inspired a lot of people listening who have got ambitions to grow, and scale their business as well, because we know the market will change. We are in an industry where it flips, doesn't it? And it's turbulent for some people at the minute, and bumpy, as you say, but it will flip and change. And that growth will really kickstart again for people. So lots they can learn. So thank you, and look forward to seeing you soon.
You're welcome. It's been lovely to see you.
You're welcome.